So can you see the recording button option?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay, that's great. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all for joining me again. So this is our third lecture on translation studies. And as you can see on the screen, that today we're going to talk about translation theory before the 20th century. That means still we have lots of translation theories and you know the academicians actually in different parts of the world they're working on translation theories. So with the new ones, now we will be talking about the old ones because you see that the basics of the today's translation theories that we have in our hand today, and those are based on these old things, and especially in the 19th and 20th centuries, there actually we can have these the very basics of the translation theories. Now today we will be talking that the translation theory before the 20th century. So how was it, and how actually different academicians, translators, philosophers, how did they actually work on this? Now let's see. I'll move on to the next slide. Now here, the first thing, word for word or sense for sense. So you can see at the end there is a question mark. That means it has created or it has caused a kind of debate on the same topic, that whether we should go for word or sense for sense translation. So now I'll be reading it from the screen. Up until the second half of the 20th century, Western translation theory seemed locked in what George Steiner calls a sterile debate over the tirade of literal, free and faithful translation. So you see, there are lots of debate was going on there. And this debate actually, it was tried means it's a kind of long speech, and sometimes this kind of long speech that causes a kind of what should I say, disgust. You don't like it anymore because it's too long and talking about the same thing again and again. So that kind of thing actually we call it triad. Now, this kind of triad and what was this triad? These long speeches, those were about that whether we should have literal translation, whether we should have free translation, or whether we have to ensure faithful translation. So you see, literal, free, and faithful. So these three terms are very important. For understand. So we can have literal translation, we can have free translation, and at the same time we can also have faithful translation. Now, the demarcation line between all these three, it will come later. We'll talk about it later. So just for the time being, remember these three words. Now, the distinction between word for word, that means the literal, and sense for sense, that means free translation, goes back to Cicero. It was in the first century before the Common Era, or before the Christian era, BCE, and Saint Jerome, the late 4th century CE, that is the Common Era, or we can say the Christian era. So one was before the birth of the Jesus Christ, and Saint Jerome actually he worked on translation. After the birth of Jesus Christ, and forms the basis of the key writings of translation in century nearer to our own. That means these two key figures, Cicero and Saint Jerome, one was before the Common Era, before the Christian era, and another one was after the Christian era, Common Era. So these two figures, Cicero and Saint Jerome, actually they contributed very significantly in the development of the translation studies, or the work of translation, or you can say the ideas of translation, how actually it has to be done. So they worked on it because they translated from one language to another language. For example, Cicero actually, he was a statesman. Actually, he was from the Italy, and he was a statesman. At the same time, he was a critic. He was a writer. He was a lawyer. He was a diplomat, and he was we call him consul. That means he was an advisor to the king. So you see, the person he himself actually he was involved in so many tasks. But though Cicero actually, in most cases, he preferred that he was a statesman. That was his first. He personally preferred that title, that I was a statesman. But his contribution to the translation and also in the academic area is so huge that though he loved to call him as a statesman, but we can see that how, I mean, what is his contribution also in the academic area, especially in the translation of, because he translated works from Greek language to Latin language, because at that time very few people can speak Greek, but he was very conversant with this language. He had a very good command over that language. So that's why Cicero translated from Greek to Latin language to make the Greek or the classical text available for the Roman people. And Saint Jerome also, I will ask you, please don't use anything on the screen because I have unlocked your screen sharing. So if you do something, then automatically I can see it on my screen too. Okay? Don't write on the screen anything. Thank you. All right. Now, Saint Jerome, he was called saint, but actually he was a theologian, and also he was a writer and he was a translator. Saint Jerome translated the New Testament and also the Old Testament from Hebrew to Latin language. Okay? Saint Jerome translated from Hebrew to Latin language. And even he went to Jerusalem and he stayed there for a long time. And then, yes?
So once again, St. Jeremy?
No.
He was...
No, listen. That is not St. Jeremy. I'm saying St for saint. And Jeremy, not okay. Jeremy, that is Jerome. Okay? Listen to me carefully.
Jerome.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
St for, that is the abbreviation for Sharia calendar, that is for saint. Okay?
Yes,
right, sir.
Okay. So Saint Jerome, so he was from Italy, and also he went to Jerusalem just to learn Hebrew and to gain more knowledge about the Hebrew language. So he stayed in Jerusalem because you know the Jewish people actually they spoke Hebrew. Still actually they speak Hebrew. So he stayed there. He learned the Hebrew, and also he translated the original text, the original Bible, the New Testament and the Old Testament from Hebrew to his language, that is Latin. So that was his contribution. And later on, when he finished, translating the New Testament and the Old Testament, and afterwards, in the later 15 years of his life, he spent most of his time writing different kinds of articles, essays. And in those essays, actually, he tried to explain the idea of translation, that why he translated from Hebrew to Latin, the Old Testament and the New Testament. And also, he gave the reasons, and also he tried to explain the procedure or the process of translating, in all those articles, all those writings. So these two people, they are the key figures, in the world of translation that we can say. Now, next we have, okay, now, sorry, I think I missed one slide. Yeah, slide 3. Okay, that's great. Now here is slide 3. Now, this is something actually, it was written by Cicero, and this is his point of view about translation. Now, Cicero outlined his approach to translation in, it's a very difficult name, I don't want to, but still I can pronounce it like De Optimo Genero Oratoram. Genero Oratoram, De Optimo Genero Oratoram. And you know, optimo means the optimal, okay? And genre, it means genero, and oratorum means oratory or the speech, okay? The genre of speech. That in this text actually he talked about the idea of translator and the interpreter, okay? The translation. Now here, introducing his own translation of the speeches of the Attic orators. Now you see, that means he is talking about his own translation works, and these are the names of, from his article. Now here he says, this is the translation of his, what he said in his language. And I didn't translate them as an interpreter, but as an orator, keeping the same ideas and forms, or as one might say, the figures of thought, but in language which conforms to our usage. And in so doing, I didn't hold it necessary to render word for word, but I preserved the general style and force of the language. See, it's very interesting. So that here actually he is explaining his philosophy of translating, that why and how actually he translated, this kind of stuff, especially he's talking about how. Now you see, he's saying that I didn't translate them as an interpreter. So he's saying that I was an interpreter, but as an orator, but I translate them as a speaker, as an orator. So you know that I told you the other days that an interpreter actually he interprets, an interpreter interprets the, I mean the speech of someone, a prominent figure or anyone else. For example, I gave you an example that if Chinese president, if he visits Bangladesh, then you will see that he can't speak Bangla, and in most cases we have seen that Chinese people, they're very much conscious about their own language. So even if they travel to any foreign countries, you will find that the Chinese delegates, and especially the Chinese ministers, they never speak English. Have you noticed that?
Yes, sir.
When Chinese ministers, if they travel to USA or even if they come to Bangladesh, they will not use English. They will speak in Chinese, and they will use an interpreter. He will interpret that Chinese into English or into Bangla for the Bangladeshi or the English audience. Do you get my point? What I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
So that is the job of the interpreter. He just interprets the speech of another speaker. But an orator, he is not an interpreter. The orator, he himself, what does he do? He is the speaker himself. Now, look at the difference between the interpreter and the orator. The orator is the speaker himself, and the interpreter is the person who interprets or explains the speech of the orator. Have you got the point? Is it understood? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So that's the basic
Yes,
difference
sir.
between the interpreter and the orator. So orator is the speaker, and interpreter is the person who interprets the language or the speech of the orator. Now, here he is saying that Cicero is saying that when actually I am translating any work, then I prefer myself that I am an orator, as if he is the writer, as if he is the author of the source text. Got it? When he is translating from the source text to target language, to target text, TT, what does he do? He translates it just like the original writer, as if he is writing it in his own language, okay? But not as an interpreter, because interpreter has the chance to deviate from the original speech. He will just take the idea and then he will explain it to the audience, those who can't speak the language of the orator. Got it? So what is he doing?
Yes, sir.
As an orator, keeping the same ideas and forms. So he will keep the same ideas, same forms of the original text, and as one might say, now he's saying that people may say that the figures of thought, but in language which conforms to our usage. So he is writing or keeping all those ideas and forms of the original text into the target text. What is he doing? He is trying to find the conformity of the usage between two different languages. For example, from Greek to Latin. So when he was translating, he tried to keep the structure, the language, the ideas as it was found in the Greek, and he tried to transfer those ideas, those style directly as it is found in the Greek from Greek text to the Latin text. Now, and in doing so, I mean, while actually he was doing this, I mean, maintaining the conformity, he's saying that, and in so doing, I did not hold it necessary to render word for word, but I preserved the general style and force of the language. So he didn't go for the word for word. Maybe not exactly the same word and the equivalent of that word, I mean, found in Latin. So, for example, in the Greek, there is X. Now, it is not necessarily that Cicero will keep that X exactly in the language, in Latin language. He may deviate, but he will keep the sense as it is. There will be no change of the meaning. There might be a change of word or the syntax, but there will be no change of meaning. Meaning will remain same. So is that clear? Understood? Hello?
Yes, sir. Like a paraphrase. Yes.
Not exactly paraphrasing. Here, paraphrasing, it sounds like paraphrasing, absolutely, because that's sense for sense. But you see, he maintained some kind of faithfulness. একটা বিশ্বস্ততা তিনি মেইনটেইন করেছেন, বুঝতে পেরেছো? That means I will take the sense, but that sense will remain just like the original. At the same time, when people will read it, they will find it that even it is not for word, but the exact thing, just like the original text.
Yes, sir.
But in paraphrase, sometimes, I mean, the main idea, it might get a little bit deformed or changed. Okay? We'll come to those points later, but let's just concentrate on this. All right, next.
Okay.
Now, here's the interpreter of the first line. I mean, in that text that so far actually we have talked about. The interpreter of the first line is the literal or word-for-word translator, while the orator tries to produce speech that moves the listeners. So the orator, he will not translate exactly the same word, but he will take the role or take the lead just like the speaker. So as if the orator, though he is a translator, that is the idea of the Cicero, that I'm not an interpreter, but I will act like an orator. And the orator, you see that though actually he is translating the thing, but he will, I mean, as it is for the sense for sense. So he will try to motivate or he will try to move the listeners with his oratory, just like the original speaker. But he's saying that not like the interpreter, because if the interpreter only interprets, that is the word for word thing, he will only take the words as the main speaker or the speaker is, I mean, delivering his speech. You listen to the speech and he will just translate it. That's his only job, the interpreters. He will not give any further explanation, and he will not say it in his own way. So he will listen to the speaker and then he will translate it into the target language for the audience. That's it. Now the orator, originally orator is the speaker. But when you consider yourself as a translator and just like an orator, then you will try to be just like the original text. So you will keep the sense, and at the same time, you will try to remain faithful, but you will not use the word for word translation. In Roman times, word for word translation was exactly, so you see that in the that I was telling you that when actually the Roman Empire was there, at that time word for word translation was exactly, it was like this: the replacement of each individual word of the source text, invariably Greek, with its closest grammatical equivalent in Latin. So Latin was the language of the Roman, but I told you that these Latin people, I mean the Roman people, they tried to translate the text from the Greek to Latin. And while actually they were Latin, I mean during this process, they will find the replacement. You understand? প্রতিস্থাপন করা কি করবে? The replacement of each individual word of the source text. তারা source text-এর প্রত্যেকটা শব্দকে তারা replace করার চেষ্টা করে invariably Greek, তার মানে অবশ্যই Greek language-এ। Greek language-এর প্রত্যেকটা শব্দকে তারা source text-এর কি দিয়ে প্রতিস্থাপন করার চেষ্টা করবে? With its closest grammatical equivalent in Latin. So they will take the Latin, that is their language, that is a target language. So they will try to replace exactly the Greek word or Greek thing, Greek sense, with the equivalent that is found in the Latin language. So equivalence found in the Latin language. So you see, they will try to be very close to the Greek text. The Latin translator or the Roman translator, they will try to translate the Greek text, and they will try to keep the grammatical equivalent in Latin. In that way, the closest grammatical equivalent, they will try to preserve it in their target text. This was because the Romans would read the target text side by side with the Greek text, Greek source texts. But this is very interesting. Do you understand this? What is it saying here? The Romans would read the target texts side by side with the Greek source texts. Do you understand it? What does it mean? Anyone? Can anyone respond to this? Okay.
Sir,
Yes, go on. Go on. Please give it a try. Oh, yeah. Yes, go on.
sir, please explain again.
Okay.
I'm not understanding.
For example, Why actually they will try to find the Greek grammatical equivalent in Latin? যখন গ্রিক থেকে ল্যাটিন ভাষায় কোনো কিছু ওই রোমান পিপল বা ইটালিয়ান লোকরা তোমাদের সহজে বোঝার জন্য তারা যখন গ্রিক ভাষার কোনো কিছু যখন তারা অনুবাদ সরি ইয়েস গ্রিক ভাষার কোনো ক্লাসিক্যাল টেক্সট যখন সেটাকে অনুবাদ করার চেষ্টা করতেন ল্যাটিন মানে তাদের ওই ইটালিয়ানদের যে ভাষাটা সেই ভাষা যখন অনুবাদ করার চেষ্টা করতেন তারা করতেন কি যে ওই গ্রিক ভাষার সাথে মিল রেখে তাদের ল্যাটিন ভাষায় ঠিক যে একদম কাছাকাছি যে গ্রামাটিক্যাল স্ট্রাকচার গুলো পাওয়া যেত ওরা ওটাই ব্যবহার করতো যাতে মূল টেক্সটের সাথে তার তেমন কোনো পার্থক্য না হয় লোকজন যেটা দেখলে বুঝতে পারে যে দুটোই কাছাকাছি বোঝা গেছে কি বলছে
Yes, sir.
কারণ কি বলতে পারবে what is the reason behind this
Sir,
because most
understandable.
of the people because it was a trend at that time that people would learn in Italy, in Latin, I mean in Roman, I mean that period of time in that particular empire, they will learn Greek because it was a matter of prestige. বুঝতে পারছো কি বলছি এখন যেমন ইংরেজি জানলে সবাই খুব একটু অন্যরকম ভাবে ভালো ইংরেজি বলে সেই সময় ইটালির কেউ যদি গ্রিক ভাষা বলতে ইটালির ভাষা কি গ্রিক নাকি গ্রিকের ভাষা কোথায় গ্রিক ভাষা কারা ব্যবহার করতো গ্রিসের পিপলরা তাই না এবং সেই সময় তারা শিল্প সাহিত্য অনেক উন্নত হওয়ার কারণে এই ইটালিয়ানরা তাদের অনুসরণ করার চেষ্টা করেছে আমি বোঝাতে পেরেছি
Yes, sir.
তো যেহেতু এটা একটা ম্যাটার অফ প্রেস্টিজ ছিল গ্রিক জানাটা এই জন্য মোস্ট অফ দ্য ল্যাটিন পিপল লিভিং ইন দ্য আই মিন ইন the Roman Empire, especially the educated folks or educated group of people, they could speak Greek. So when they will find any translation work from Greek to Latin, so they will take the original text and also they will collect the Latin text. So they will put them together side by side and then they will compare. Got it?
Yes, sir.
Just like our case, all of you can speak English and you can read English. So if you heard, if you hear that I translated a book from English to Bangla, then out of curiosity you will buy the English original text that is available in the market, and also you will collect a translation book from me, or you will buy it from the market. Then what will you do? First you will read the original text, then later you will read my translation. Then you will say that whether Mr. Sharia's translation is good or bad, but whether it is okay, faithful, or whether it is sense for sense, or whether it is word for word translation. Then we'll try to understand it. বোঝা গেছে কথাটা এবার?
Yes, sir.
এই রিজনের কারণে ওরা করেছে কি যে যারা অনুবাদক ছিলেন তারা চেষ্টা করতেন একদম গ্রিকের সাথে ল্যাটিনের যে স্ট্রাকচারটা মিল আছে ওই মিল রেখে অনুবাদ করার চেষ্টা করতেন। Now we'll move on to the next slide. That is slide 5. Okay, just mute your microphone if it is not needed. Whenever I'll ask you a question, then you can unmute yourself. All right. Now, the disparagement of word-for-word translation by Cicero and indeed by Horace, who in a short but famous passages from his Ars Poetica underlines the goal of producing an aesthetically pleasing and creative text in the target language, had great influence on the succeeding centuries. So disparagement, that means their dislike. Disparagement means their dislike. So you see the Cicero, as a translator, as an academician, he didn't like word-for-word translation. Understood? Have you got it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Similarly, Horace,
Yes, sir.
another writer, he is a very famous author, and he was also a dramatist, okay, and also a poet. So Horace, he also had the same idea. He also didn't like word-for-word translation. So you see, Cicero didn't like word-for-word translation. I mean, they had a kind of disliking, okay? I'll not say that is abhorrence, তীব্র ঘৃণা. It's not like that. Disparagement means you don't approve it. তুমি এটাকে অনুমোদন দাও না, ভালো লাগে না এই ট্রান্সলেশনটা, ওকে? যে ওয়ার্ড ফর ওয়ার্ড ট্রান্সলেশন আমার পছন্দ না, একটু সেন্স ফর সেন্স, ওয়ার্ড ফর ওয়ার্ড দুটো মিশেল থাকলে ভালো হয়। So that was their idea. Now Horace also didn't like it, and in his poem, Ars Poetica, I mean in this writing, he explained it. Horace explained it. কেন তার পছন্দ। Now he's saying underlines the goal of producing an aesthetically pleasing and creative text in the target language. তিনি কি বলছেন যে টার্গেট ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজে আমি অন্য একটা ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজ থেকে যখন আমার ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজে কোনো কিছু অনুবাদ করব সেটা যেন প্লিজিং হয়, ক্রিয়েটিভ হয়। আন্ডারস্ট্যান্ড? প্লিজিং মিন্স মুগ্ধকর, পড়ে ভালো লাগবে, এবং একই সাথে সেটা যেন পড়লে আমাকে খুব সৃজনশীল কোনো কাজ মনে হয়, যে অনুবাদটা সৃজনশীল হয়েছে, অনুবাদটা খুবই মনোমুগ্ধকর হয়েছে। এস্থেটিক্যালি মানে কি, শৈল্পিকভাবে মনোমুগ্ধকর, শৈল্পিকভাবে সৃজনশীল। টার্গেট ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজ যখন করছে, অর্থাৎ আমার কোনো অনুবাদ যদি ইংরেজিতে হয়, তুমি হয়তো পড়ে বলতে পারো যে স্যারের এই অনুবাদটি শৈল্পিকভাবে খুবই মনোমুগ্ধকর এবং সৃজনশীল হয়েছে। নাও ইজ ইট ক্লিয়ার টু ইউ?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Excellent. And these texts are poetic. It is available online. It is available online. If you have interest, you can read it by yourself. I checked it, that it's there in Poetry Foundation also, you can find it. So Ars Poetica, that was the, I mean, this writing actually, it had great influence on the succeeding centuries. পরবর্তী শতাব্দীতে এই লেখাটা মারাত্মকভাবে প্রভাবিত করেছে ট্রান্সলেটর এবং একাডেমিশিয়ান। Now we'll go further. Thus, Saint Jerome, the most famous of all translators, just look at this. Saint Jerome, the most famous of all translators, cites the authority of Cicero's approach to justify his own Latin revision and translation of the Christian Bible, commissioned by Damasus, Bishop of Rome. So Bishop of Rome, his name was Damasus. Actually, he asked Saint Jerome, he gave this duty to Saint Jerome, and he said to Saint Jerome, please translate the Bibles, the Old Testament and the New Testament, from Hebrew to Latin. So he was the Bishop of Rome. That means he was the head of the, all the bishop in Rome. So he gave this job to Saint Jerome because he was a translator, he was an academician, and he was a very good, you can say, writer. So that's why he gave this job to him. So when Saint Jerome translated from Hebrew to Latin, the Old Testament and the New Testament, then he took this idea of his translation process, or his technique of translating words, especially Bible, from Hebrew to Latin. He took this idea, this theoretical idea, the way of translation, he took it from Cicero, and also he took it from, Saint Jerome took this idea from Cicero's. The way Cicero's actually, he preferred it, that the sense for sense translation, but not word for word translation. So we can see that Cicero, and you can see the later on Saint Jerome, all of them actually, they preferred sense for sense translation, but not word for word translation. Now, next slide. Here you see what Saint Jerome said about his own translation work. He says that now I not only admit but freely announce that in translating from the Greek, except of course in the case of the Holy Scriptures, where even the syntax contains a mystery, I render not word for word but sense for sense. Clear? What is he saying? He's saying, announce that in translating from the Greek, it is not only about the Greek, from the Greek to Latin, except of course in the case of the Holy Scripture. So he said, in the case of the Holy Scripture, what did he do? Where even the syntax contains a mystery. That means in the Holy Scripture, the syntax, bakko gotho, have you ever noticed that the structure or the sentences in the Holy Scriptures, like in the Quran, in the Bible, in the Ved, Tripitaka or Gita, you see the language, even if it is written in Bangla, or even if it is written in English or translated into English, or even in Arabic, you can see that they are not regular language, right? Got it? What I'm saying?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
ভাষাগুলোর মধ্যে কেমন একটা ভার আছে না, ওজন আছে না, একটা রহস্য আছে না। স্ট্রাকচার গুলো আমরা প্রতিদিন যে ভাষা ব্যবহার করি বা বলি, বা এমনকি বইয়েরও যে ভাষা আছে, ওই বইয়ের ভাষার থেকে ওটা অনেক বেশি মিস্টেরিয়াস, রহস্যময়, একটু অ্যালিগরিক্যাল মিনিং, বিনিথ দ্য মিনিং, অর্থের নিচে আরো অর্থ লুকিয়ে আছে, এরকম একটা ব্যাপার না? তারপরে সেইখানে থাকে প্রচুর গল্পের মধ্যে দিয়ে জিনিসগুলোকে মানুষকে বোঝানোর চেষ্টা করা হয়। সেই গল্পগুলো ছোট কিন্তু অনেক সলিড, বেশ জটিল, এবং তার মধ্যে অনেক রূপক ব্যবহার করা হয়। বুঝতে পেরেছো কি বলছি?
Yes, sir.
যে কারণে ওদের সিনট্যাক্স, সেন্টেন্স স্ট্রাকচারের মধ্যেই মিস্ট্রি। That's why he's saying that I render not word for word. Because in that case, if you go for the word for word, then you will lose the mystery. অরিজিনাল টেক্সটের যে ওজনটা, ওটা মিস হয়ে যাবে যদি খালি শব্দ দিয়ে যদি একদম হুবহু ওরকম করে অনুবাদ করো। Then what can you do? Sense for sense. That means what sense was there in the original text, you try to translate that sense in your language, then you can balance. You can have the balance between the original text, that is source text, and the target text. Okay? Okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes,
fantastic.
sir.
Now next, although some scholars argue that these terms have been misinterpreted, Jerome's statement is now usually taken to refer to what came to be known as literal or word for word and free sense for sense translation. So now from there, people have got these two ideas, that one is word for word and another one is sense for sense translation. So, but Jerome rejected the word for word approach. We have already come to know that from our previous slides, that Jerome actually he had a kind of disliking against word for word translation or approach, because by following so closely the form of the source text, it produced an abstract translation, cloaking the sense of the original. That is the idea. Noticed it? I can block it for you so that just look at this. Here you see. Says that word for word approach. If you go for that approach, then what will happen? In the source text, the mystery, the sense, that will be lost. And if you go for the word for word translation for this kind of holy scriptures or biblical text or this kind of text, what will happen? It will produce a kind of abstract translation. That translation will sound very weird, unusual, and the real meaning will be lost in translation. That's why you say that cloaking the sense of the original. Cloaking means, you know the cloak? What does it mean? C-L-O-A-K, cloak, C-L-O-A-K. Cloak means কাপড়, গায়ের উপরে যে লম্বা বড় কাপড় কোটের মতো আমরা যেটা পরি না, বুঝতে পারছো? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So cloaking
Yes,
the
sir.
sense of the original. That means if you go for that kind of translation, I mean word for word translation, then what will happen? The sense, the meaning beneath the meaning, okay, the allegorical meaning, the metaphorical meaning, all these things will be lost, because you didn't understand what is the sense. You just translated it as the word found or structure found in the original text. You tried to find the same kind of equivalent syntax or equivalent words in your language, and you translate that. And while actually you're doing this, this kind of translation, the original meaning or the sense of the original text, it will be lost. Okay. Now, the sense for sense approach, on the other hand, allow the sense or content of the source text to be translated. So you see, the sense for sense approach, if you go for this approach, on the other hand, allow the sense or the content of the source text to be translated. So if you go for the sense for sense translation, then you can go for the sense and the content of the source text, because that will help you. But otherwise, you cannot go. You see, I'm just under just blocking these two words so that you can say it. Look at this. The sense or content of the source text, you can preserve it if you go for that kind of translation. Sense or content that you can preserve by using the sense for sense approach. Now here he says that in these poles means two different terminologies that we are calling pole. মানে দুইটা মেরু। এখানে একটা মেরুতে কি আছে? In one pole we have, help me, tell me. In one pole we have
Word for word.
Excellent. And in the another pole we have
Sense for sense.
Thank you.
For sense.
Excellent. These are two poles. Now he's saying in these poles, that means sense for sense and word for word, can be seen the original of both the literal versus free or form versus content debates. This is the same debate is going on and on. So literal versus free. So literal means word for word, free means sense for sense, or literal means exactly the form, and on the other hand, sense for sense means content. Content doesn't mean that the whole thing. Content means the idea, okay? So if you go for the sense for sense, that means you are focusing on the main idea. You are focusing the meaning, what is in it. But if you go for the form, then you will just translate the words and the syntax, and the sense or content is gone. It won't be there. So that will be a kind of, rather I should say, it will be a kind of misinterpretation or mistranslation of the original text if you do that. I mean, word for word. All right. Now, after this, no, yeah, slide 9. In here you see it says to illustrate the concept of the target language, TL means target language, taking over the sense of the source text. Jerome uses the military image of the original text being merged into the target language like a prisoner by its conqueror. Now you see how actually he has given the analogy of, I mean, this kind of translation, that to illustrate the concept of the target language taking over the sense of source text. That means if you don't bother, here you see the taking over the sense of the source text. I have made it, I put it in the bold font. Can you see that? Can you see that? Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
Can
Yes,
you
sir.
see that?
Yes, sir.
That means if you go for
Yes, sir.
I mean, if you sacrifice the sense, taking over the sense, sacrificing, that means you don't bother about the meaning. You only bother about the text. As it is in the original text, it must look like in your language, just like that. Then what will happen then? Then he has given an analogy. If you do so, if you sacrifice the sense, only if you care about the word for word translation, then it is like this. The military image of the original text being merged into the target language like a prisoner by its conqueror. Then how will it look? As if, you see, what happens then? The conqueror means, what does it mean, the conqueror? The conqueror
যোদ্ধা
means, no, conqueror means the winner.
জয় করা
Exactly. Winner, the king.
জয়ী তো স্যার জয়িতা আর কি
No. Bijoy.
বিজয়ী হ্যাঁ
For example, King X. I don't want to mention a name. For example, King X is the conqueror. He is the winner. So King X, when actually he wins a battle, then what does he do? He takes the rivals. He takes the rivals. You see the rivals, or you can see the military people, personage or personnel. He will take them as prisoner, right? জয়ী রাজা কি করেন? পরাজিতদেরকে তিনি কি করেন? আদর করে বাসায় পাঠিয়ে দেন?
No, sir. Prisoner part.
তাদেরকে প্রিজনারে নিয়ে যায় না?
Yes, sir.
তো উনিও সেটা বলছেন যে তুমি যদি word for word translation করো, ওটা, excuse me, please just put it into mute. কথা বলা শেষে একটু মিউট করো, একটু কষ্ট করো, তাহলে আমি কন্টিনিউ করতে পারছি না। Now he's saying that it's just like this. The conqueror, as he takes his rivals, the oppositions, I mean, as he takes them as the prisoners, word for word translation just like that. Original textটাকে একেবারে ধরে নিয়ে টার্গেট ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজে তুমি বসিয়ে দিলে ওটা অনেকটা প্রিজনার নেওয়ার মতো। ওখানে 10 জন ছিল, এখানে এনে 10 জনকে তুমি জেলে করে দিলে। Understood? Is the analogy clear? It's very interesting. Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I think now it's clear to you. Okay. Now, therefore, he says that interestingly, however, as part of his defense, St. Jerome stresses the spatial mystery of both the meaning and syntax of the Bible, for to be seen to be altering the sense was liable to bring a change of heresy, to bring a charge of heresy. Now, again, he's saying that of his defense, St. Jerome stresses the spatial mystery of both the meaning and syntax of the Bible. Now he's saying that there is a mystery in the Bible, in the syntax and also in the meaning. উনি বলছেন যে বাইবেলের মধ্যে তার যে সেন্টেন্সের যে স্ট্রাকচার এবং বাইবেলের মধ্যে ওই স্ট্রাকচারের মাধ্যমে যে একটা অর্থ তৈরি করার চেষ্টা করা হয়েছে, দুটোই রহস্য। কারণ এগুলো দিয়ে রূপক অর্থ অনেক কিছু বোঝানোর চেষ্টা করছে। এই জন্য শব্দগুলো পড়ে সারফেস লেভেলে যা মনে হয় আসলে তা না, তার নিচে আসলে অনেক মিনিং আছে যদি বুঝতে হবে। Do you understand what I'm saying? Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
So for to be seen to be altering the sense was liable to bring a charge of heresy. উনি কেন বলছেন বলতো, যে আমি মিস্ট্রিটা ধরে রাখার জন্যই এই সেন্স ফর সেন্স যদিও ব্যবহার করেছি, কিন্তু আমি মিস্ট্রিটাকে অরিজিনাল টেক্সটে যে আছে ওই মিস্ট্রিটাকে এইখানে টার্গেট ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজে, অর্থাৎ আমার নিজের ল্যাটিন ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজে, গ্রিক থেকে, হিব্রু থেকে এখানে আনতে আমি কি করেছি, ওই মিস্ট্রিটাকে ধরে রাখতে সেন্স ফর সেন্স ট্রান্সলেশন করেছি, অন্য কিছু। কথা বুঝে গেছে?
Yes, sir.
উনি কেন বলছেন জানো? why actually he is trying to defend his style or his approach to translation? Do you know what is the reason?
No, sir.
তুমি কোনো হোলি স্ক্রিপচার্স কোরআন কিংবা বাইবেল কিংবা গীতাকে নিজের মতো করে অনুবাদ করে সেন্স ফর সেন্সে অনুবাদ করে যদি সেটাকে দেখতে অন্যরকম লাগে তাহলে তোমাকে কি করবে বলো তো? ওই রিলিজনের লোকরা তোমাকে অনেক
পানিশ করবে।
এক্স্যাক্টলি, তোমাকে তারা শুলে চড়াবে যে তুমি আমাদের অরিজিনাল টেক্সটকে ডিস্টর্ট করেছো, তুমি আমাদের রিলিজনের এগেইনস্টে কাজ করেছো। দ্যাট ইজ কল্ড হেরেসি। হেরেসি মানে হচ্ছে কি? ধর্মের বিরুদ্ধে অন্য কিছু বলা বা ধর্মীয় জিনিসের বিরুদ্ধে অন্য কিছু প্রচার করা, সেটাকে হেরেসি বলে। তাহলে এই জন্য উনি বলছেন কি যে ওই মিস্ট্রিটা ধরে রাখার জন্য আমি সেন্স ফর সেন্স নিছি, আমার অন্য কোনো উদ্দেশ্য নেই, দয়া করে আমাকে শুলে চড়িও না, আমাকে মেরে ফেলো না। বুঝতে পেরেছো কি বলছি? So
Yes,
Jerome is defending his cause of translating from that language from Hebrew to Latin language. So that's why people will not make him liable of heresy. তাকে হেরেসির জন্য কেউ তাকে লায়াবল করে তাকে বিপদে ফেলবেন, এই জন্য তিনি আগেই তার রিজন দিয়ে রাখছেন যে আমি এই কারণে এই ধরনের ট্রান্সলেশনের অ্যাপ্রোচ নিয়েছি। Now, here he says the literal and free Paul Safis, once again in the rich translation tradition of the Arab world, which created the great center of tradition in Baghdad, there was intense translation activity in the Abbasid period. Abbasid period, that means that is the Abbasid Khilafah. In Bengali we call Abbasiyo Amoler Khilafah. You know the Muslim rulers, we call them the vicegerents in English, and in Bengali we call them Khalifa, right? That means they are the representatives of the people. They are not like king, but they will rule over the people, but they will be the representative of the common people, especially the Muslim people. So here you see during this Abbasid Khilafah or Abbasid period, centered on the translation into Arabic or Greek scientific and philosophical material, often with Syriac as an intermediary language. So you see, during the Abbasid Khilafah or Abbasid reign or Abbasid period, at that time in the Arab world, especially in Iraq, in Baghdad, the translation work, it was going on, in a different scale, in a huge scale. You simply can't imagine, because they translated most of the works, important works from because they could speak Greek. These Arab people, they learned Greek, and they use this Greek language knowledge. They use that for translating Greek works from Greek to Arabic language. Understood? You get my point?
Sir.
So this is very interesting.
Yes, sir.
At that time, in 1750 to 1250, এই সময়কাল ছিল অনুবাদের জগতে একটা অন্যতম বলতে পারো যে গোল্ডেন টাইম। এটা শুধুমাত্র যে আরবদের জন্য তা না, ফর দ্য হোল ওয়ার্ল্ড এট দ্যাট টাইম, বিকজ ইউ নো দিস 1750 to 1250 অ্যারাউন্ড দ্যাট টাইম, এবং তার আরো আগে পিছিয়ে কিছু সময়, ওই সময়টাতে তোমার ইউরোপে ছিল ওরা বলে অন্ধকার যুগ, বিকজ দেয়ার আর নো দ্যাট কাইন্ড অফ সায়েন্টিফিক অর একাডেমিক অ্যাডভান্সমেন্ট, নলেজের তেমন অ্যাডভান্সমেন্ট ছিল না বলে তারা মনে করে। কিন্তু সেই সময় আরব ওয়ার্ল্ড কিন্তু বসেছিল না, আরব ওয়ার্ল্ডের সেই সময় ছিল স্বর্ণযুগ। তখন ওয়েস্টার্ন ওয়ার্ল্ডরা আরবদের কাছ থেকে নলেজ গুলো তারা নিত। তারা কি করেছে, এই আরবিক ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজ শিখবার জন্য, এবং সেই সময় আরব ওয়ার্ল্ডে পৃথিবীর প্রথম বিশ্ববিদ্যালয় স্থাপন করা হয়। কি বলছি বুঝতে পারছো তোমরা? The first university in the world, it was established in the Arab world, in Morocco. তোমার মরক্কোর নাম শুনছো তো, নাকি সেটাও শোনো নাই?
শুনছি স্যার।
মরক্কো এবং তিউনিসিয়া, এই জায়গাতে পৃথিবীর প্রথম বিশ্ববিদ্যালয় স্থাপন করা, এবং সেই বিশ্ববিদ্যালয় স্থাপন করেছিলেন একজন মহিলা। আমি তার নামটা ভুলে গেছি আনফরচুনেটলি। আমরা পরবর্তী ক্লাসে আমি তোমাকে এই সম্পর্কে ইনফরমেশন দেওয়ার চেষ্টা করব। সেই ইউনিভার্সিটি আজও আছে। ওই ইউনিভার্সিটি এস্টাবলিশ করা, এবং সেইখানে এই অনুবাদের জন্য এবং বিশাল বিশাল ডিপার্টমেন্ট ছিল, তারা সেখানে এই কাজগুলো করতে থাকে। এবং পরবর্তীতে এই নলেজের যে এই ধারাটা, ইট এক্সপ্যান্ডেড টু স্পেন, এবং সেই সময় স্পেন ছিল মুসলিমদের অধীনে। তোমরা গ্রানাডার নাম শুনেছো, স্পেনের কর্ডোভার নাম শুনেছো। ওই জায়গাগুলোতে তখন মুসলিমরা আরো বড় বড় বিশ্ববিদ্যালয় স্থাপন করে। এই আরব ওয়ার্ল্ডে এই নলেজ গুলো নেবার জন্য খ্রিস্টান এই থিওলজিয়ান্স থেকে শুরু করে ফিলোসফার্স, ম্যাথমেটিশিয়ান, সায়েন্টিস্ট যারা ছিল, যেহেতু ওই সময়তে ইউরোপে তেমন কোনো নলেজের অ্যাডভান্সমেন্ট ছিল না, ওরা লেখাপড়ার জন্য চলে আসতে হচ্ছে স্পেন এবং আরব ওয়ার্ল্ডের এই বরফ এবং তিনশী দেশগুলোতে। Do you get me what I'm saying? তোমরা কি বুঝতে পারছো আমার কথা?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
তোমাদের এটা জেনে
Yes,
রাখা দরকার, তাহলে তোমরা এই পরের আলোচনাটা বুঝতে পারবে। And they came to these universities and they learned Arabic. কোন ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজ শিখেছে?
Arabic.
চিন্তা করতে পারো যে ইংলিশ পিপলরা এবং ফ্রেঞ্চ পিপলরা, জার্মানরা, তারা এই বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ে আসছে, তারা অ্যারাবিক শিখে অ্যারাবিক ভাষায় তারা কি করছে, তারা ওই ভাষায় নলেজ গুলো নিয়ে ওদের দেশে ফিরে যায়, সেগুলোকে ইংরেজিতে যার যার ভাষায় অনুবাদ করে তাদের পরবর্তীতে রেনেসা পিরিয়ড এসছে। এই রেনেসা পিরিয়ড আমরা যে রেনেসা পড়ি, এই রেনেসা এমনি আসেনি, এটা আরব ওয়ার্ল্ডের কন্ট্রিবিউশন। তারা তাদের কাছ থেকে এই যে আলকেমিয়া, সেটা থেকে আসে আলকেমিস্ট বা কেমিস্ট্রি, রিমেম্বার আলজেব্রা আসছে এই আরবিক শব্দ থেকে। কারণ আমি নাম ভুলে গেলাম, ওনার নাম জিব্রা বা এরকম একটা নাম দিয়ে একজন সায়েন্টিস্ট, উনি আলজেব্রা তৈরি করেছিলেন, বা এটা নিয়ে উনি প্রথম এটাকে নিয়ে কাজ করেন। মেডিকেল সায়েন্স উন্নতি আসছে ইবনে সিনার হাত ধরে, তারা তার কাছ থেকে ইবনে সিনার লেখা বইগুলো নিয়ে, সেখান থেকে নলেজ নিয়ে, সেই ডায়াগ্রাম গুলো ব্যবহার করে ওদের দেশে যে সেগুলোকে অনুবাদ করে আরো অ্যাডভান্সমেন্ট করেছে। তারপরে আসছে রেনেসার যুগ, এমনি আসেনি। Because that was the contribution in the science and technology. That's the contribution of the Arab world. Similarly, এই বাগদাদ ভিত্তিক, মানে বর্তমানে ইরাকের যে রাজধানী আমরা যে বাগদাদ জানি, সেই সময়কারও সেটা ছিল the capital city, and that was the hub of knowledge in the Arab world. And people used to go there. They traveled to Baghdad to gain knowledge. তারা সেখান থেকে নলেজ নিত, অনুবাদ সাহিত্যে তারা কাজ করেছে, অনুবাদিত লেখাগুলো আরবিকে যে লেখা সেগুলো তারা পড়ে নিজ দেশে সেগুলো নিজ ভাষায় অনুবাদ করে তারপর তাদের মানুষের জন্য সেগুলো তারা ছড়িয়ে দিয়েছে। So that's why it says that intense translation activity in the Abbasid period centered on translation into Arabic of Greek scientific and philosophical material. এর আগে এই পরিমাণে তোমার কাজ, গ্রিকদের কাজ তোমার ইউরোপিয়ানদের কাছে এরকম অ্যাভেলেবল ছিল না, তারা সেগুলো এরকম পায় নাই। যখন আরবরা গ্রিক শিখে গ্রিক থেকে আরবিকে যখন ট্রান্সলেট করলো, তখন ইউরোপিয়ান লোকরা আবার কি করলো, তারা চলে আসলো তোমার আরব ওয়ার্ল্ডে, এসে তারা তাদের আরবিক ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজের জ্ঞানগুলো নিয়ে সেখানে তারা ইউনিভার্সিটিগুলোতে লেখাপড়া করে পরবর্তীতে তারা নিজ ভাষায় সেই বইগুলো অনুবাদ করার কারণেই সেগুলো অ্যাভেলেবল হয়েছে কাদের কাছে, ইউরোপিয়ান পিপলের কাছে। সেটা দিয়েই পরবর্তীতে তারা রেনেসাঁ এবং এই মডার্ন পিরিয়ড তোমরা আজকে যা দেখছো তা আসবে, সেটা একা হয়নি। And in this Arab world at the same time, often with Syriac as an intermediary language, তারা সিরিয়াক ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজও তারা করেছে। সিরিয়াক আরেকটা আরবিকের কাছাকাছি আরেকটা ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজ, তারা সেই ভাষাতেও তারা কি করেছে, অনুবাদগুলো করেছে। So Baker, following Rosenthal, describes the two translation methods that were adopted during that period. এই আরব টাইমে দুইটা ট্রান্সলেশনের দুটো ধারা তারা তখন ফলো করেছিল। আমরা সেই দুটো ধারা নিয়ে কথা বলে আজকের মতো এখানে শেষ করার চেষ্টা করব ইনশাআল্লাহ। Now here it says, sorry, this. All right. Now here you see the first method associated with Yuhana Ibn al-Batri and Ibn Naima was they were highly literal and consisted of translating each Greek word with an equivalent Arabic word, and where none existed, borrowing the Greek word into Arabic. Now here you see it's taken from the Baker. It says that the first method associated with these people, and these are two famous translator. One is Ibn al-Batri and another is Ibn Naima. So these two translators, they translated all these Greek words or Greek work from Greek to Arabic language, and they tried to find the equivalent Arabic word for the Greek word. And if they didn't find it, then they would use the Greek word and they will use that in Arabic. তোমরা কথা বুঝতে পারছো কি বলেছি, what I'm saying? Please respond. Anyone?
Yes, sir.
তারা এই দুই ট্রান্সলেটর কি করেছেন, গ্রিক থেকে আরবিকে হুবহু ট্রান্সলেট করতেন এবং গ্রিক ওয়ার্ডগুলোর হুবহু আরবিতে তার প্রতিশব্দ কি আছে তারা সেটা ব্যবহার করতেন তাদের ট্রান্সলেশন ওয়ার্কে, টেক্সটে, ফ্রম গ্রিক টু আরবিক। আর যেখানে দেখতেন যে এর কোনো এই গ্রিক শব্দটির কোনো আরবিক শব্দ হয় না, তখন তারা কি করেছেন, সেই গ্রিক শব্দটাই তারা আরবিকে বসিয়েছেন এবং পরে তারা সেটা ফুটনোটে এক্সপ্লানেশন দিতেন যাতে মানুষ সেটা বুঝতে পারে। Is it clear to you now? Do you get me? Okay. Isn't it interesting that how this whole bulk of knowledge or this field of knowledge, especially this translation works, and this knowledge, without translation, actually, you simply can't have knowledge. Today, we are reading all these books you see from different languages. It has been translated into English, and now we're reading it in English and also in Bangla. So translation contributed, I mean, immensely, very significantly for the spread, I mean, for the spread of knowledge. Without translation, this kind of knowledge actually couldn't have been spread. For example, we are reading all these classics in translation in Greek. Did you study your translation, classics in translation?
Yes, sir.
All these texts from Greece. Did you read them in Greek language? তোমরা কি গ্রিক ভাষায় পড়েছো? কোন ভাষায়
No,
পড়েছো?
sir. In English.
English.
So don't you think that the translator actually they did a great favor to us by doing so?
Sir.
Otherwise, those
Yes,
texts,
sir.
otherwise those texts, those knowledge, those philosophy, they would have been, I mean, they would have been, what should I say, unfamiliar, unknown to us, right? ওগুলো আমাদের কাছে অজানা, অপরিচিত থেকেই যেত না সারা জীবন।
Yes, sir.
And if you really wanted to know those texts, then in that case, you would have to learn those particular language, Greek. আর যদি জানতেই হতো, জানার ইচ্ছাই থাকতো যে গ্রিক লিটারেচার কেমন, ফিলসফি গুলো জানার ইচ্ছা করছে, তখন তোমাকে কি করতে হতো? গ্রিক ভাষা
Great
শিখে
শিখতে হতো।
তখন ওটা করতে হতো। কিন্তু সেটা তো আমাদের পক্ষে সম্ভব না। It's not possible for all the people to learn all the languages, Greek language, French language, and German language. It's not possible for us. So at least if we learn English or any one or two languages, then in that case we could use those, those translated words, and we can increase our knowledge, right? So this was the contribution of the translators at that time, and they helped to spread the knowledge, I mean, to the rest of the world, and that is their contribution. And we must not ignore that. We must give importance to that, and we must admire them, and we must appreciate them, and we must learn about the whole process, so that we can also contribute to the existing knowledge by creating new knowledge, by translating and by creating new knowledge in that way. All right, so I would like to conclude today's lecture with that note. So if you have anything to say or anything to add, you can add it now. Otherwise, I would like to wrap up our today's session. So do you have any question or any observation or any opinion, please? Any question? No question? Nothing? So far you have understood our today's lecture, right?
Sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, listen, if you have any confusion, as usual, as I say all the time at the end of my lecture, that please contact me. And also I'm going to share this video just like before, so that if you want to just know more about it, then you can just watch the video again, and also you can collect information from different sources. And otherwise, I will be here to provide you more information from different sources. So if you need anything, just let me know. Okay?
Yes.
All right.
Okay,
Thank you
sir.
very much. Thank you. See you.
Thank you, sir.
See you in the next lecture. Actually, I think I have another lecture with you at 1 o'clock, right?
Sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Take care of yourself. Bye.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Walaikum assalam.